International news now.
So let's move on to our second news story on the recent shakeup within the political and economic establishment in Saudi Arabia. In order to get a sense of the rapid changes in that country as Crown Prince Salman consolidates power, let's take a look at a short clip from CNN.
One thing you need to know about what is going on in Saudi Arabia is the pace of change is fast and unprecedented. The person driving this change is Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a 32-year-old who rose to power just 2 years ago. He's the man calling all the shots, and his latest moves inside and outside the country show that he means business. Take this, for example. Earlier this year, he said in an interview he won't tolerate corruption at any level by anyone. Now, a newly formed anti-corruption squad has gone after a high number of high-profile princes and businessmen, sending a clear signal of the prince's intent. His critics say the Crown Prince is just making a power play and removing potential rivals before he ascends the throne. But to his supporters, it's all part of his plan to transform the kingdom. And that same zeal for action can be seen in Saudi foreign policy, with a much more muscular posture towards its arch-rival Iran in places like Yemen and Lebanon. An active new leadership, upending traditions, we have entered a new era, and no matter what, the results will be dramatic.
So let me make a few points here designed to emphasize how significant these internal political changes are. We're in the steps of a significant reforms and/or revolution in Saudi Arabia that's going to have huge implications for regional politics and for Saudi relations with the United States. So first, these arrests included some of the wealthiest Saudi officials and entrepreneurs in the country, including one of the world's wealthiest men, Prince Alwaleed bin Talal, who's a major investor in American firms. This is Saudi Arabia's Warren Buffett, worth probably $30 to $35 billion. He, in his private holdings and his prior management now of the Kingdom Holding, a huge sovereign wealth fund, he had major ownership stakes in Motorola, Twitter, eBay, Time Warner, Citigroup, 21st Century Fox, and Apple. 5% ownership in Apple. Apple's market capitalization is $900 billion. He controlled $45 billion of Apple's equity. This is a major international investor. Second, while there is some problem of widespread corruption in Saudi Arabia, these arrests are seen as a power grab by Crown Prince Salman. He is removing potential opposition figures as he consolidates power. In particular, he's targeting individuals that have their own independent base of political support or economic support in the case of Alwaleed. Third, the arrests are seen as a coordinated attack on leaders, I jumped the gun a little bit, on various power centers. The leader of the National Guard was arrested, for example, to remove a potential military threat to MBS's consolidation of power. Other prominent figures in the economy include such as Prince bin Talal, has been seen as an attempt to subdue power establishment figures with enormous economic resources who could then block future economic reforms. Finally, there are key arrests in the government to make sure that the Saudi state falls into line with this rule. And more broadly, it's moving against and trying to separate the state from the family. Many of these people that have been arrested have been cousins, other potentially rival princes, and so the idea is eliminate the influence of this extended family network and strip them of access to the Saudi state and the Saudi government to consolidate MBS's hold.
Yeah, and it's really a construction of personal rule by him, right? And we've got some examples globally about that, right? And so now also this crackdown is tied to a wider regional battle with Iran. And in addition to the mass arrests that happened over the weekend, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Said Hariri, resigned his post in the Lebanese government on live TV in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, and that's
on Saturday, the same day that this purge happened.
The same day as the arrests, right? And so the resignation was blamed on Iranian interference through Hezbollah on Lebanon's politics, and the resignation was clearly tied to Saudi
Yeah, Hariri
influence.
was supported by the Saudis, right?
And so it was clearly they were pulling the strings here. Now, also on Saturday, the very same day, another recent foreign adventure, Saudi Arabia is continuing military intervention in Yemen.
And just to know, MBS has been leading those military and overseeing the military operations of the Saudi war in Yemen.
He's got his hands in all of this. So in Yemen, they've been intervening, right? This grabbed headlines. There was a failed missile attack on Riyadh's airport. The missile was intercepted, right? But it was launched by Houthi rebels in Yemen, and these Houthi rebels are backed by Iran. So Saudi Arabia very quickly declared the missile attack an act of war, not by Yemen, but by Iran, because they said that Iran is providing the missiles to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. And so they are publicly declaring hostility toward Iran and perceiving it as this. And this raises the stakes for a military confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran for regional hegemony. So the Crown Prince here, Salman, is also the defense minister, as Pat pointed out, and he's overseeing this war in Yemen and these other foreign policy adventures. And it's probably tied to this overall attempt to consolidate power, because he can use some of these foreign policy moves to distract attention, to rally the population. And so this is going to be a continuing story to keep your eyes on if he can hold this thing together. I mean, because he's taken on some powerful interests.
2 points. President Trump has tweeted support
Yes.
This morning, I believe,
Yes.
for the Crown Prince. Jared Kushner was in Saudi Arabia, was it last week or the week before, strategizing with MBS. Supposedly they have a very close relationship. David Ignatius of the Washington Post reported in a column on Sunday in the aftermath of this that they were up visiting, strategizing many nights while Jared was over there till 4 o'clock in the morning. So the Trump administration has been informed, my guess is very, has good intel on what's going on and the larger plans.
Improved relations with Saudi Arabia has been really one of his chief goals in the Middle East. And so this really affects that. And, he's doubling down with them.
The other thing to think about, and we're foreshadowing something we're going to cover in a couple of classes, what's one of the larger structural shocks that's facilitating these reforms? You can talk about the rise of Iran in the Middle East in the last decade, but we also have to talk about oil prices and the collapse in oil prices over the last 4 or 5 years, because the Saudi government has long relied on high oil revenues to essentially have a social contract. We're going to have an authoritarian state with restricted political participation, but we're going to try and distribute these oil revenues broadly within society to prevent political opposition. The problem is oil revenues have collapsed. Why have they collapsed? In part because of oil production in shale in the United States. It's a much larger system and global oil market. And this goes back to the price war that Saudi Arabia launched against American shale producers back in 2014.
And that also fuels some of the economic reforms that MSB is
This is one of the reasons he's trying to push through economic reforms to reduce Saudi Arabia's dependence on oil revenues.